In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Lord, graciously give us your Holy Spirit. Guide us from within. Give us your light, your understanding, your discernment, and incline our will toward yours. Draw us to you, and kindle the fire of your love in our heart. And we ask you this through the powerful intercession of Our Lady, who is always present among us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and in the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being there for this 14th lesson of the Book 1 of Dark Night, reading and studying St. John of the Cross. I know some of you have important questions to ask, and I am all ears. I'll try to do my best. Who would like to start? Maybe Blessing, if you want to start, please grab your mic. Yes.
All right. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Yeah, I have some questions, and it's all around the topic of consolation and desolation and growth. So the first question really is, my understanding is that uh, throughout our spiritual journey, we go through peaks and troughs of consolation and desolation throughout our spiritual life. I guess the first question is whether or not the differences, the peaks and troughs diminish throughout our spiritual life as we go. That was the first question.
Do you mind if we stop here, because
Yes, that's fine.
I will unfortunately forget the following questions.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. So the question is, there are ups and downs. It seems that in the beginning the ups and downs are what they are, rather strong, and then you're asking if these ups and downs are supposed to diminish the more we grow spiritually, the more the virtues are growing. They are supposed to, are they supposed to diminish?
Yeah.
Your question is directly taking us directly to one of the lessons of Solid Foundation course, where I do explain first the 3 acts of faith, hope, and love, and then we move on to immediately, as you called it, the ups and downs of spiritual life, and they are exactly what you're saying. So let me just explain in which sense we can conceive ups and downs, and will they continue, and what is supposed to diminish, if there is anything that's supposed to diminish. So thank you, and just bear with me for the other questions. I will try to answer now.
Okay.
So you are supposed now to have the whiteboard. So if we draw the now, what will we draw? What we will draw is not the ups and downs in themselves, but the attachment and dependence that we have toward them. Do you see the difference? Because one thing is the ups and downs, and the other is my attachment to it and being conditioned by it, you see. So if I draw a curve like this, I'm not drawing the objective existence of an ups and downs. I'm drawing the attachment that I have to them, my dependence. Dependency? Is dependency a good word? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the beginning, as you know, it's the old man in us who is unaware that he is in control of our spiritual life. So we are following, which means in the sense that the new man in us is very small, and therefore the majority of our behavior, the biggest part of our behavior, is to be led by the behavior of the old man. And we are not aware of this because we think that since God is the goal, since Jesus is the goal, we don't think that there are different means to reach him. We think that we are doing well. So when we feel the presence of God, since the size, allow me to say it this way, since the size of the old creature in us is still quite considerable in controlling our behavior, we will draw it this way. We will draw this amplitude of the wave. But this shows to which extent my entire behavior is conditioned by it. Now, if a new proportion of the new man in me is growing, I will have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more, I'll be more agile than before. So the intensity of the wave, the amplitude of the wave will diminish, which is this line here will diminish. So it is directly related to the growth of the new man in me. But almost regardless of the presence or absence of consolations or desolations.
Okay.
Almost. I'm a bit here, almost. So I would almost then draw two drawings in one. I'm exaggerating, but just allow me. So God might give more here, or changes could be like this. It's just theoretical, this red line. So we might still have more consolations and more desolation in intensity, but I'm less affected by them. Why? Because the core of my being, which is the activation of the old man in me, is growing. So let me take this just this drawing just to explain what is happening. So say this is the human being, this is me, this is my spirit, this is God here. The goal, of course, is to activate the new man in me and say that the new man activation is more or less in this area, or maybe better to draw it this way, I think. Yeah, this area here. So activating the new man in me is equivalent to making an act of faith, an act of hope, and an act of love. Sorry, what did I do? Sorry, I did pressed a wrong button. So if I am activating here my, say here, my mind, my will, and my memory, I'm making acts of faith that are connecting me to God himself. So my energy is going in the green area. So in the same time, I am neglecting the old man functioning in me. I am neglecting it. So the nucleus, the new nucleus of the green area is strengthened, and the outer part is less influenced by the changes. And let me give you a very simple example. I don't know if you had this experience. If you swim in the sea and you have waves, strong waves, if you dive in the water, the waves won't touch you. But if you go up, the waves might take you, might put you upside down, etc. So there is a way to combat the waves by diving. Whenever a big wave is coming, you just dive. The wave goes, and then you come up. Your capacity of diving is saving you. And here, the wave is what is happening here outside. The changes are in fact happening outside. While this line here is more stable. So when in this drawing we talk here about we become stable here, it's simply because I have direct access to God. I have direct access to God through the act of faith, the act of hope, and the act of love. So I am stabilized in the stable, and I'm less influenced by what is happening in the lower parts. I am here. Here it's growing. My muscles, the muscles of the new creature in me, the muscle of my mind, making an act of faith, of my will, making an act of love, of my memory, making an act of hope. These muscles are stronger now and keeping me united to God, because the definition of a theological act is to keep me united, or to unite me, or to make me be touched and be touched by God. The great advantage is that we have at any time accessible the possibility to make an act of faith, act of hope, act of love. And the great advantage of them is that they nourish us of God. We are nourished each time we do it. And therefore we are strengthened. So the new creature in us is stronger and stronger and more stabilized and less influenced by whatever happens, be it natural or quote unquote supernatural, or a temptation. As you remember, when we read a few lessons before, he said that the devil interferes, but by making us here, as you can see in the drawing here, do you see the arrow of my mouse? The devil can interfere here very easily and make us feel certain things. You see, the devil here can come, or impressions from outside in our daily life. We have different influences. It could be natural influences, like, I don't know, natural joy. No, I'm celebrating my birthday, or I'm greeting a person whom I have a great appreciation and friendship. Or the devil himself, who comes here and influences whatever happens. So anything that occurs in this area, I'm not attached to it. I'm less attached to it, and I'm finding God at any time in this area. Of course, here we are talking of a person who exercises herself a bit more. So coming back to your question, is there a stabilization here in the end of the day? The answer is absolutely yes, because as you can see here, the freedom is acquired, and whatever is happening outside, we become here stabilized in God himself. So, and this is huge, because who doesn't want peace in his life? Who doesn't want to have this minimum of strength of being, having God accessible at any time, at ease, and not being influenced by all trials? It doesn't mean here you can have trials. They might sort of influence the person, but they will never reach the core of our being here. The more we are strengthened, the more here we are united and strengthened, the less we are influenced by what is happening. St. Teresa of Avila, in the book of Interior Castle, in the 7 mentions, will describe as if the human being had two areas or two beings. She would say the castle of the king, which is then here the green area if you want, but you have to include God in it. And you have the king who sent his armies to fight. Where do they fight? They fight in the soul, in the emotions. She doesn't mention emotions, but I mentioned them, and in the senses. So she says a person can be suffering for different reasons, but she says the king inside is fine. And this is all of it one person. She has this example in one of the chapters, the 4 chapters of the 7 mentions. You may read it if you want. She's trying to explain the difference between the spirit and the rest. She says the first time ever she speaks about the spirit, almost the first time ever she speaks about the spirit and the existence of a distinction between the spirit and the rest is in these 7 mentions. And as an example, she said, I'm trying to explain to you, she takes this, one of these two examples is this example of a king, which is then the spirit united with God, which is here, the green area, but include God in it. At peace, happy inside, but then you have war outside. You have war outside, and by war put daily life, daily dealings, difficulties, trials, and God knows that there are trials. She herself says, look at the Lord himself, look at his mother, look at the apostles, they all had trials and difficulties. This is why St. Paul, at a certain point in one of his letters, he says, we have difficulties, but we are not completely shattered. We are sad, but we are not totally depressed. We are this, but we are not totally that. So he's showing that there is a core of his being that is having an intimacy with God, and it's strong enough, but all what happens outside is less influenced. So it doesn't mean that you don't suffer. You suffer, but it doesn't really reach the core of your being. Of course, I'm covering further stages. So go ahead. Now, is this okay? Is
Yes,
this okay?
yes, thank you, Sean.
So it's a good news. I remember many years ago when I sort of understood that it was possible in this life to have a certain stabilization. That for me, it was like a big sigh of relief. It's like, yeah, I can reach a point in my life where whatever happens, I don't reach that level of like being completely shattered, you see, which is more or less in the beginning when you're here. It's like everything is falls apart, you see. Well, no, you reach a point where you are less influenced. There are changes around you, but you're less influenced. Go ahead.
I guess the second question kind of follows on from it, in that like you kind of hinted at it from the first answer. You know, because we're not, I guess if we're going through the peaks and the troughs, and the peaks and the troughs are the consolations and the desolations they still of the magnitude that they would have, but of course, as you said, we're responding to its shape. It's where our attachment to it is different, and so we get that stabilization, and we're getting that stabilization because we are able to manage those challenges of the consolation and desolation in a better way. Does that mean that because the challenge is kind of, if you like, conquered or managed, that because we get graces from the times of desolation because we're stretching ourselves in faith, in order to, during those stages. So if our attachments to them are less, doesn't it mean that the challenge is less? Does that then mean that the grace we get from those times is less, if you see what I'm saying?
So if they diminish, is then the quality of the or the merit of the acts is less? Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah, because yeah, that's correct. That's what I'm asking.
I think your question was slightly different.
Yeah, the question was slightly different in the sense that before I was saying, okay, if because we, my understanding is that when we have those desolations, we can make an act of faith in the darkness of those desolations, and we're stretched spiritually, we gain. So if the peaks and the troughs are less, yeah, does that then mean that we are not able to grow as much
Mm-mm.
in those later years, in those times of where there's stabilization? Is the question.
Yeah, we're getting closer, I think, to the question when you asked it to me before the lesson. Okay. First, if you allow me, just to clarify, I'm not 100% sure that St. John of the Cross uses the word desolation as such. I'm not changing what you're saying. I'm just clarifying, just being careful, because it's a technical word used by Saint Ignatius of Loyola
Okay.
in the exercises, and it has a very specific meaning inside of the exercises. And then
Okay.
outside of the exercises, of course, as you know, I already talked about this many times. They are unfortunately um, explained in a different way. I prefer aridities, or feeling of absence of God,
Okay.
even if you will say, but that's the definition of desolation.
Okay.
I prefer to separate a little bit, to distinguish ourselves from this, because Saint Ignatius means something very specific and very reduced,
Mm-hmm.
while here St. John of the Cross talking is well generalized in daily spiritual life. Just allow me this. Then your question. Now we get to the core of your question. If we have the impression that the ups and downs are less, does this mean that we are producing theological acts, faith, hope, and love, less intense or of lesser quality? Could be also put this way, I think. Yeah. Now, it's important to understand something, because we are with St. John of the Cross, and we are following his descriptions, his description of a change that is not generated by us, but by God himself.
Mm.
He says that it's God who diminishes or increases this or that, or put it in this place or not
Mm.
in
Mm.
this place. Now, I'm very much inclined to say God is capable of managing our spiritual life with the aim of, well, having the aim of our good. Is he capable of removing completely any type of consolation? Yes, of course he is. Do we control that? We don't. But do we have a say in that? To a certain extent, yes, we have a little say there, which is what? At least to know and to make ourselves available, to know that God can change, and this is not negative, it's positive. So no, that to know this is already a lot. There are many people who don't know that, so they think that if they don't feel, then God is upset with them. But to know it is already a huge progress, because then God feels freer to act and to be tougher, if you want, in removing the feeling, these perceptions or feelings of consolation of his presence, etc. Perception of his presence. And the other point I want to say, which in a way I already said, is don't doubt that if God sees that it's possible and we are ready, he will then remove all sorts of perceptions, consolations, and you will see further on, not in the first book of Dark Night, but the second book, to which extent God can go in this intensifying contemplation, intensifying his intervention, and really shattering all what we thought was right in our spiritual life. Yeah, I would rather say trust in God that he does it. He is the one in control and he can do it. Don't worry. But on our side is to say, okay, Lord, I'm available. You know me, you know my limits. So if it's beyond my means, of course, you won't do it because it won't bear fruits. It will do the opposite effect. But give me the strength so I can just be courageous. As I said in the last lesson, no, I said, Holy Spirit, give me the fortitude so I can be a good warrior and undergo this this tunnel and then come out of it. You see, the greater, because he addresses the issue. No, I don't think it's in these chapters, but later on, he addresses the issue. He said, why do we have few people in the other night, the following night? And sometimes you feel that the reason why we have less people is because of a less of courage. The people don't have the courage. They fear. Yeah, a lack of courage. And I think that it is true, and it is important to work on that, to be courageous, to be bold, and to go for it with great trust, immense trust in God's action. This makes the purification shorter, certainly more intense, but don't worry, he knows how to increase and then stop, because he can't put full power all the time. He presses, then he removes, then he presses, then he removes, and he knows how a few hours, then he stops, and then he waits a few days or whatever, and then a few hours, and he stops, etc. So this is not at all our business. But what is our business, I think, is rather to ask for the strength to just go for it. It's like, I don't know, you have a person who has a great fear or phobia from the receiving injections, no? It does happen, no? There is a video circulating on YouTube, funny one, of a gentleman who's like not capable of bearing it, grown up, not a young person. So it's a little bit the same. It's like you fear it, but you have to overcome that fear by saying, okay, Lord, I don't mind, just go for it, but let us finish about that. And trust me that this generosity is key. And there are people who would spend years and years in the second dark night because of this lack of determination and decision, and say, okay, courage, lack of courage. It's just, okay, go for it. You know, he won't destroy you, but it's just, he needs to do the job. So go for it. Let us, okay, we will suffer for a while, but we know that there is life beyond that. There is life deep and beyond, already deep and beyond that. So let us finish with that. So in few months they are done, instead of spending, I don't know, 60 years, and it's not achieved. Why? Because of this lack of courage. And Teresa of Avila talks about the needed courage in spiritual life. She says spiritual life needs courage more than anything else. And she is thinking of, you know, wars and soldiers and battles, etc. And remember the expression, no spiritual warfare. Warfare means combat. Combat means war. So we need to be courageous. Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus says, till the last minute, I will keep the sword in my hand. I won't let it fall from my hand. She said, I'm fighting till last minute. I think that spirit of being a fighter is very important. And if we don't have it enough, or we don't have it at all, it's important to ask the Lord to give us this courage of a fighter, and put our full power into that. Okay, so this is what I can say. I wouldn't worry about that. God is capable of removing everything, but it's unbearable for the majority of us. So let us just say, okay, pray, as I said, these two prayers. Give me the strength, and also go for it. Okay?
Okay, thank
We need
you,
to be
Sean.
warriors, warfare, like good, courageous soldiers, lions. So the third question.
The third question kind of follows on. Basically, if we are able to grow more when we're, when we're in that absence of, when we're suffering those aridities or absence of the
Mhm.
feeling of the presence of God. Um, so absence of the presence of God. So when we do then get consolations, I guess then there becomes that temptation to resist them, or kind of to reject them, because you're thinking, oh no, I'm
Yeah,
losing my opportunity to grow.
you are too converted in this case, too much converted in the other side, to the point that you don't want the isolation. You remind me of something that Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus said. I'm quoting her here second time today. She says, as much as many people ask God for visions, feelings, consolations, pleasures, etc., as much as I don't ask for this, I said to him, I need the truth, and only the truth. I don't want false things. And by false, she explains, she says, because I know that God cannot be seen in this life. This is why I asked him not to give me fake things. I only want truthful things. So I don't want consolations. And she remembers also a passage in St. John of the Cross when he says that asking for consolations is a venial sin. Asking for consolations is a venial sin, says St. John of the Cross. It's not me. I'm not teaching anything from my own well. Now, it is true that, yeah, you will sort of say, okay, now I don't want to feel anything, and if you feel it, you are tempted to reject it. Now let me clarify now something different now, because when you read St. John of the Cross, not in the Dark Night, Ascent and Dark Night are like they go together. But then you have the latter parts of Spiritual Canticle and Living Flame. And when you read them and you see the description he makes, and the sweetness and gentleness, the experience of the sweetness and gentleness of God, you are like doubtful, a little bit like you say, it's like, is this still true? Is this God? Is this possible on earth? And he says yes, trying to be fair with him. So I'm giving you a little bit of possible answers. He says, I know people will not believe me. And he repeats that various times in the Living Flame. Now, how can we understand this? So let me just explain the difference between what happens in the beginning and what happens in the end. I will just show it by a simple drawing so you can understand. You are supposed to have here. Now, if we have this drawing, God is here, our spirit is here and is growing. This is the soul and this is the body. The consolations, pleasures, feelings, sweetnesses, etc., usually come from outside and are given into this area. So they come outside. And here I am rather following St. Teresa of Avila in the fourth mention. She explains the differences between pleasures and sweetness, etc. Something that comes from God and something that comes from outside. Now, if we are supposed to be deeply connected here with God and constitute a certain relationship with God in this area, we need to understand that God then communicates himself to us. That's what is happening. He communicates his grace. This is the nucleus or the roots of our being. It seems, according to St. John of the Cross, that some echoes, distant echoes, but some echoes from what is happening deep inside of us are falling like a distant intuition or distant quote unquote feeling is given to the soul like a deep peace and a very subtle joy. Nothing to be compared with the heavily sensual, physical, material consolations, sensual things, pleasures, etc., that could occur in this area. So there is a flip. It's flipping. It's changing completely. Almost instead of in the beginning and for a certain time receiving things from below to the upper part, it seems that the more we practice the three virtues, the more something new is growing, and this new core being that is constituted in us and growing sends almost invisible waves, gentle, almost unperceivable waves of peace and joy. It's not felt in a sensual way, but it comes from the deepest part of our being. This is truth, and this is correct. This is why we will talk about joy. We won't talk about feelings, pleasures, consolations, sensual aspects, etc. No, we will speak about pure joy and peace. It is true that in further stages, like after union and with a new sort of trials of participation into the passion of the Lord, these rays could be stopped. That's possible, and this occurs. Think of the trial of Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus, because when they ask her, then what about the peace and the joy? She says it's really in the bottom of our being. I don't feel it. So it's important to know that there is a change. In the beginning, we don't perceive it. In the beginning, we don't perceive. We are more inclined to perceive the heavyweight sensual things that were given before. But the more we grow, the more this subtle joy and subtle peace, but solid and deep. And when the purification ends, there is perfect peace given then. Because what is peace? It's the absence of fight between or discrepancy between us and him. What is peace? What is true peace? It's the absence of discrepancy, of difference between us and him. So when we are united, there is peace because he is peace himself and there is nothing between us and him. You see, that's union. Okay. So when the purification, well, or end of purification before union. So when the purification ends, there is no fight between us and God. There is no work of purification. There is no difference between him and some impurities that he can find in us. You see. So I think that's important to remember, that maybe in the beginning it's not perceived. We don't seek it. And anyway, it's very, very subtle. It's not something that is comparable to this. And it's just a very distant echo of something very beautiful happening in us that we are not seeing. Okay, but this is it's truth. It's truth. Okay. Yeah. Is this okay?
Thank you, Jean.
I don't know. Have I got to the bottom of your question? Because the rejection, I know you talked about the rejection, a possible rejection. Yes, you're right in the sense, like for instance, there is a verse in one of his stanzas where the bride says, I think it's verse. I think it corresponds to what you are saying. Let me, in the spiritual canticle, in the stanza 13, the bride says, "Withdraw them, beloved, I am taking flight." Withdraw is in the Spanish. It's, I think, a bit stronger than withdraw. Apártalos. Apártalos means like put them away. Apártalos, amado, que voy de vuelo. This is in the stanza in your collected works here. It's the stanza 13. In my edition is page 473. In this stanza, there is a very powerful communication. It's the end of the purification, and it's a very powerful first communication of the groom to the bride. It's in a way the celebration of the betrothal, no? Betrothal? Engagement, not betrothal, engagement. It's like you have engagement and then marriage. So engagement. So the end of purification corresponds with a moment of engagement, where there is a powerful grace that the groom gives to the bride. Why does she say apártalos, which means take them away? Take what? Your eyes. And what are your eyes? Your eyes are the symbol of his divinity. So it's his divinity powerfully communicated to her. But since she is still very, she is purified, but still the spirit is still attached here. The spirit is still attached to the soul. The spirit is almost formed, but is still attached to the soul. So whenever something is communicated to the spirit, the temptation, because they are together, linked still together, the thing is that it will continue to be communicated to the rest, to the upper part of the human being. And it is so powerful that it is unbearable for the person, because the spirit hasn't been separated yet. But once the spirit is separated, the fullness of God is communicated to him. Well, fullness, between quotation, is communicated to the spirit, but it doesn't really create any damage or hurt or pain to the rest. which is the upper part. So in this case, it's something similar to what you're saying, but it's a bit advanced. I'm just showing you the example that the communication is so strong and it doesn't correspond to the nature of God. This is why she says no, because if it falls in the conscious part and the sensual part, that's not. These houses are in peace now from a certain time. So we don't want to move them with something that is not God himself. So she said, stop communicating yourself to me. Stop showing me your eyes, and your eyes means that your divinity, because it is too strong. And since it's not yet spiritual marriage, it falls into areas that it's disturbing them in a way. A little bit what you say, but it's a bit advanced. Okay, so in this sense, yeah, she says is exactly what you say. It's like, keep them away. I don't want them, because they are creating a misunderstanding. They are giving me something that is a wrong information. I don't need that, because that's not the truth. A little bit like Saint Therese of the Child Jesus says, that's not the truth. So I don't want it, you see. Now, I would say again, trust the Lord. The Lord is the one who manages and governs everything. He knows what to give, what not to give. And the best thing to do is, Lord, I'm asking for your will. You see, I want your will. Don't give me fake things. Don't give me things that are not true. And have mercy on me. You see, that's that. You need to trust the Lord. It's not, we're not managing all this. He manages them. We have a little part, but it's not that huge. And I think the best way is to always make ourselves available in a courageous way, bold way, saying, okay, Lord, go for it, but don't give me fake things, and have mercy on me, of course, because, you know, if he pushes a little bit more, it's like an elephant sitting on an ant. So it could squash the ant. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. On that note, okay, I think, is that okay? Okay, I think Hilda, you had a question, a very interesting question. So please go ahead. We're listening to you.
Hi, John. So you said the dark night is contemplation. And I'm just wondering, because many religious communities, or even in the wider church, they talk about contemplation as well. So I'm just wondering if this is actually what they mean when they say contemplation. Do they mean the dark night, or is this just an understanding or definition from the Carmelites?
Okay, first, it's not me. You said you say. It's St. John of the Cross teaching. I try as much as I can not to modify it or change it, even in my explanations. Yeah, he's teaching. Now, you're asking a big question, in the sense that contemplation is a very important matter, as you can see. To be very honest with you, you will find probably as many definitions of contemplations as many of persons you will have. Yeah. So if you have 100 persons, you will have 100 different definitions of contemplation. We haven't reached yet in the church, universal church, a final complete definition of contemplation. We have a little definition in, it's not a definition, but a description in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but we don't have an official document from the Church that defines in a complete and practical way contemplation, for the simple reason that I don't want to expand too much on that, but for the main reason is that we tried from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, different schools, as we call them, schools of spirituality, tried to find a definition an agreement on contemplation, but unfortunately, even if some aspects were clarified, I mean, mainly one aspect, but we had it from the beginning, so I don't think that's an achievement, which is saying that contemplation is supernatural. We haven't reached a common agreement. So you have not only differences in the individual understanding of the individuals, but also you have differences in the understanding of the different spiritual families in the church. The Dominicans, the Carmelites, the Benedictines, the Jesuits, not to mention others, and the Franciscans, if you will. Now, this is the state of the church, and my master, Father Louis Guillet, who died in 1992, who sort of lived throughout that last century. It's a great century, by the way. Talked to me a lot about this issue of contemplation and how to understand it properly. He was extremely keen because he knew about all other definitions, about important authors in the last century, Dominican authors, and also Carmelite authors of the last century. Remember that in the Carmelite tradition, St. Thomas Aquinas, who is a Dominican, was considered before Vatican II as being the main master in theological studies. So the Carmelites had the Discalced Carmelite had a certain duty, if you want to, more than others, to follow St. Thomas Aquinas' teaching. And since we had very important theologians, especially in Rome, in the last century, in these years, 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, I won't mention their name, who were extremely influential. So their opinion and understanding of contemplation moved to the Carmelites. Now the question, and here I am following from very close my master, Father Louis Guillet, I think that the best way to find an answer is to read St. John of the Cross. And this is what we're doing, reading and studying. I don't claim to do something else. The course is very long. It could sound a bit boring for many people, for too long, but the aim is to read. And unfortunately, many authors don't read the text. They project on the text. So I hope by reading in front of you the text and showing you what he says and the connections, so we are really facing the text, I hope that it will be more convincing to deduce his opinion on contemplation. But since we are in the church, it's important for you to know that we have John of the Cross, but we have many others who talked about contemplation. So you have to bear with the church and accept that we can have different opinions. It is a central issue. It saddens me and breaks my heart to see the differences in opinions, because sometimes the differences are huge, despite what some historians, recent young historians said about the issue. There are huge differences. I studied that. I spent big part of my life studying that. My master spent all his life studying that. So I'm benefiting also from what he gathered in his life. And he was a very thorough reader and study of St. John of the Cross. So you have to accept that there are other schools, that there are other definitions, and that till today, we don't have a thorough definition. Altogether, theoretical and practical. We don't have, neither nor. So practical means, how can I contemplate? It's a mystery. So you have different opinions around. And if you ask people, can you tell me what do you mean by contemplation? Be ready to hear all sorts of answers. So my responsibility is to try as much as I can to convey to you what one author only says about it, which is St. John of the Cross. He wrote enough to help us reach to the bottom of the issue, and it is quite surprising. And I know that from Father Louis himself. It was a huge shock in his life the day he started to study St. John of the Cross at the age of 54, more thoroughly than before. And it was a huge shock in his life to discover that what he discovered through reading and studying was different from what he was taught. And it took him in his entire life to sort of digest that, because the shock was so huge, to the point that he wrote a book on contemplation, and he firmly refused to publish it during his life. It was published after his death, because in this book he was addressing other authors, and he didn't want ever to speak badly about anybody. But it was a huge shock. So very important question, vital question for the church. Unfortunately, very weak answer. We need to work. There's no other answers. And you need to accept that there is a lot of variety in the answers. The only thing I can say is what I received, which is study John of the Cross, study John of the Cross, study John of the Cross. What he says, not what you say. What he says, not what you say. What he says, not what you say. You see, I repeat it 3 times each one. Why? Because we don't do it. How many books you read on contemplation about John of the Cross? Contemplation according to John of the Cross, and it's not even following the text. Translations. Why to go that far? Translations. I'm talking for French language. I'm not talking about English language, because I'm not specialized in the English translations of John of the Cross. I can't speak for them because I haven't compared. But I did spend quite a lot of time comparing some of our translations in French. We have many translations. Some of them are one or two are excellent, and others are horrible. And amongst the horrible, it's venerable people who did it. It's not any person. It's just respectable people who did it. But it's addition to the text. And then you reach a point where you are saying things that are not according to John of the Cross. And if you are a disciple of Thomas Aquinas and of a certain school, you will then project all what Thomas Aquinas says on John of the Cross. No. It's more important to study what John of the Cross says, maybe later on to have a look at Thomas Aquinas, and maybe discover that what you thought about Thomas Aquinas wasn't really that accurate. So we can talk for hours about this. It is extremely important for the church. This is why you have this course in the end of the day. Why do we do this course? It's in order just to respect what the author is saying. And it is vital. And if you attend some of my courses, especially what I teach about prayer of the heart, you want to say something, Matti?
Yes, because how is it possible the church in 2000 years doesn't have an answer to this when it's such a, I guess, central pillar to its being? I mean, isn't one would think that something would have come up even in the fathers of the church or even early? Or am I very naive here?
No, you're not naive. You're to a certain extent, you're absolutely right. How come? You need to understand that the church has time. We live a short life, no? 80, 90, 100 years, and then we go back to the Father, but God the Father. But the church continues. There are plenty of things that took time to be clear. Let me take one simple example. I know it's not something practical, immediately practical, at least in our eyes, the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. For many centuries, the Franciscans on one hand and the Dominicans on the other hand were disagreeing, not on the fact that Our Lady was Immaculate Conception, but on when exactly it started. Sorry, not on the fact that Our Lady was immaculate, but on when she was immaculate. Conception means from the very first second. It never touched her, while others, the Dominicans, said, no, maybe a little bit after, you see. So it took centuries. Now, I hear maybe some of you saying, okay, it is important, but in the same time, it's not necessarily, at least in our superficial eyes, a practical issue, while contemplation is a practical issue because it touches on prayer. While maybe the majority of us don't see the direct connection between Mary being immaculate and us. While I did speak about this and I have some videos on that, but that's extremely new to the practical implications of the dogma of Immaculate Conception. That's even the title is odd, but there are. So please have a look at that on the section, the playlist on Our Lady. I have some talks on that. Now, Immaculate Conception took us centuries to be clarified. It takes time to have a certain clarity and a certain agreement. Why did John of the Cross write? And he is essentially talking about contemplation. Because if we had some time, and you will see it if you want to read the rest of the chapter, he says, it's very little known, he says. I'm writing, and trust me, I repeat it, his job is not to write. Even though he's a magnificent writer and an inspired writer, the best amongst the best. But that's not his mission initially. His mission is to be just a monk. He wrote because of compassion. He wrote because he saw that there is a problem. This is why then he said, okay, and now I'll dedicate time, and it's an act of charity, an act of love. What did he find? He found that the correct understanding of contemplation wasn't there. He went back to certain authors, and amongst them Dionysius the Pseudo-Areopagite, who defines clearly the line of, as I say, it cannot, nothing to be perceived. In contemplation, there is nothing, in the prayer of the heart, there's nothing to be seen, which is shocking when you say, well, then how you call it contemplation and why you call it contemplation if there is nothing to be seen? Nothing to be seen by the senses and nothing to be seen by the mind, but it is to be seen by the spirit. And now explain to me all that. You have 4 books of explanation, his books, no? Now, why did he write? He said, the first stages are very known and plenty of books, there are plenty of books, but the further stages are not known. And this is why I'm writing. You can read the rest of this chapter we were talking about, which is now chapter 8. Read 8 and 9. You will see he says what I'm just said. Because he says many people go through the first stage and it is very much described. But after that, there's hardly anything written or experienced. Written or experienced. And we're talking about what? We're talking about deep contemplation. So our knowledge of deep contemplation apparently was clearly given to us in the 16th century through this man. And nobody else. I challenge. Nobody else. Many talked about contemplation. Meister Eckhart, Tauler, William of Saint Thierry, and many others. Dionysius himself talked about contemplation. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, but none to be compared with John of the Cross. He is doctor of the church, so thank God, at least there's something. So from the actual state till one day we reach a definition that is both altogether theoretical and practical, it will take time. Unfortunately, it will take time, despite what some say, that they reach an agreement. The two schools fought in last century, In the 30s and the 40s, they fought. You can check all the journals, through journals, no? The Dominicans had their journal and the Carmelites together, and then the other side where you had the Jesuits, they had their journal, and they fought like crazy. And it's in French, it's not in Latin, so you can read it if you speak French. So they fought like crazy, but then after a while, they stopped completely. Why? Some clever young historians say because they found an agreement. I'm so sorry, they haven't found any agreement. The proof is that we don't have any text about it. I know no official text, and the church is very wise. The church will never define if it's not mature. It took how many centuries? 6 centuries to define the Immaculate Conception when it became mature. But if it's not mature, you need to wait 2, 3 centuries or more. I don't know, maybe. It is also not only a theoretical issue also, because it is a theoretical issue. We need to understand what is contemplation, but also contemplation is something practical. So if you don't know what it is practically, how can you have it? Today, what is spread, which is part of the truth, not all the truth, it's that contemplation is given by God. It's a gift from God. It's infused. This is what we use the word infused. And the fight was between infused or acquired. So the Jesuits were saying acquired, the Carmelites and the Dominicans were saying it is infused. Okay. One was underlying one aspect of it, and the other one was underlining the other aspect of it. So we came out to now, apparently, according to some historians, intelligent historians, saying, I'm ironic here, of course, sarcastic, they say that contemplation is infused. Fine, thank you very much. It's a gift from God. Thank you very much. But the sad thing is that what we have added to it is that contemplation, God gives it whenever he wants, to whom he wants, when he wants. And you have quotes, and I will quote Teresa of Avila and others. So you are dealing with incapacity to know how to receive contemplation. Not only that, but you are dealing with half of the truth, because you are dealing with a very moody God. He might give like he might not give. While in fact, what is to be given here, quoting Teresa of Avila, is the consolation, the perception, not the contemplation in itself. In a way, my answer to blessing is a perfect definition of contemplation according to John of the Cross, because you can do it, but you don't need to feel it. You can do an act of faith to God at any time. Nobody can stop you. Nobody can stop you. And this is contemplation. This can be done at any time by the grace of God. This can be done at any time. Did you feel anything? Did you see anything? No, because you're not supposed. While the popular definitions or popular things, Hilda, you are talking about people who define contemplation, they will define it the way they want. They will tell you anything. It's to see, and they might say, I don't know what they will say. Teresa of Avila had visions, or there are visions, etc. That's rubbish. That's utter rubbish. It's utter rubbish. Who said that God can be seen? Of course, old authors mentioned about it. Gregory the Great spoke about contemplation. Gregory of Nyssa spoke about contemplation. Other authors spoke about contemplation. Yes, but give me today, how do you formulate that? It's not clear. It's clear. It's relatively clear in St. John of the Cross. If you read, if you are really acquainted, very acquainted to what he says, you stop projecting, and then you read, and then you're shocked by the answer, because the answer is very, very arid. It's like, do it, but there's nothing to be seen. It's like, what? I thought contemplation means to see something. He will say, yes, you see it, but with your spirit. But by definition, the spirit is something and the rest is something else. So it's like nothing to be seen. Teresa of the Child Jesus contemplated. And then you might have other definitions of contemplation. Some people who would deal with maybe the scriptures, or would deal with have some lights in their minds, or God will reveal certain things to them, and then it will be described as contemplation. This is why then you will have different opinions. And we need clarity on that, and we don't have yet that clarity. This is why I made an effort in the School of Mary, especially in the Solid Foundation course, to clarify the 2 types of contemplation, the one specific to the prayer of the heart, where I'm following, of course, St. John of the Cross, and the one that touches on the Lectio Divina, and I'm also following St. John of the Cross, but in other chapters. I can mention them in another place. So here you are. Unfortunately, you opened a Pandora box, Hilda, but it has to be opened. But we might fight again, and no result, no avail in the end. We fought. Trust me. This is my job. I have the journals. I have the photocopies of the old journals. You can read them. You can do your research. You can see how they fought. Is contemplation acquired, or is it infused? So one writes, and then the following months the other one replies, and then the following months the other one replies. It was hell. No, we haven't reached the bottom of it intellectually, theoretically, conceptually. Truth and practical implication. Tell me how. Even till today, and I will conclude with that. In the Carmelite school, in the Carmelite order, the Scots Carmelite order, when you read Teresa of Avila, when you read her explanation of prayer in the Way of Perfection, the chapters I do explain, and when I explain Prayer of the Heart, chapter 26, 28 through to 31, how they will tell you that you have the prayer of recollection, which is a type of prayer, and then you will have the prayer of quiet, which is God's possible answer whenever he wants, the way he wants. So if you don't have anything, well, then you stay in prayer of recollection. This is how it is presented today, which is not how it works. Not at all how it works. Not at all how I explain it also, and not at all. The text is not saying that. The text didn't say that these are two different stages in growth of prayer. No, these are two parts of one prayer. Read the text is very clear, chapter 30 and 31, and even the previous one, chapter 28 and 29, she starts with one and finishes with the other. It shows that if you do this, you get that. So they are together, but we don't see it, we don't understand it. So a big struggle. Unfortunately, it's a bit negative what I am saying, but that's the reality. You might be surprised to say, Jean, why are you then so calm about it? And as I said, when you study history, when you study the history of theology, you find that the church has time. So you stop thinking of tomorrow like tomorrow. You say tomorrow is maybe in 300 years. Of course, 300 years we will all be somewhere else. But that's the reality of the church. The church has time. It's bigger than us. And it will take time. You need people specialized in this field who would sit down and study. Do we have this? Look at my face. So you need people who they dedicate their life completely to that. And here is an appeal. I appeal to the entire church. I want young people who dedicate their life only to the study of spiritual theology all their life. Study, deepen it, live it, and then transmit it. We don't have that. We study other things, but we need to study only that, only spiritual life, and not start to study this, study that, etc. We have to get to the bottom of it. We need people dedicated to that. So I want, I don't know, 60 youngsters, a place for them, a good library, some food on the table, and tell them, work. Samsung, the company that makes our mobile phones, they have 40,000 researchers, people who their only job is to research how they can improve one piece inside of the mobile. One piece. One is the screen, the other one is the processor, the other one is the connection here you have here, one is the software, etc. 40,000 people. Their life is only to improve your mobile phone, and they have the money for that. What do we do? Look at my face. 40,000, and this is about our eternity, not about the mobile phone that might fall one day in the water. 40,000 researchers. Give me 100 only. I don't want 40,000. I need 100 who will work only on St. John of the Cross and will work tirelessly, not go here and there. And don't burden them with anything else. Anything else. Nothing. Just work. 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, only on that. And then, Hilda, you will be a happier person because you will get an answer to your question. So, I need money, and it's an appeal because this video will appear on YouTube. I need money. I need 100, 90, 60, 90 boys and girls, boys and girls. I'll train them how to study, how to work, but only in that. Don't want the attention to be diverted by other problems, community problems, other discussions, fights. Don't want that. We want people focused, like the Samsung people. This one works on the screen only. The other one works on this little button here that you have to move. Of course, this is not a Samsung, this is an iPhone. So this works on the other thing here. How can you want things to progress? You said it's too long. How come the church is not doing it? Well, I am the church. I am part of the church, and I'm telling you, give me the boys and girls, give me the house. I need their vocation, but because if they don't have vocation, well, you will pay them to work? I don't know. We never saw that in the church. We don't pay people to work. But if you want to pay them, they will work. I hope. I don't know. Will they work? I don't know. So you need a vocation for people to work. And I will teach them how to do it. I will show them how to work. But I don't want their attention to be diverted. Then you will get results. Then you will be a happier person because you will know what is contemplation. Then maybe we will have a practical definition. And then in the end of the day, we might have then some improvement because the grace of God will flow. Because that's the key. If you don't have a proper understanding of how the grace of God flows, what are we doing? 300 years at least, you will wait. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.